Hello and welcome to Read Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes. I'm joined again by my brosif of Arimathea, Sako Gekchian, and we are going through the Bhagavad Gita. We are in chapter 4. We've been bouncing around. We've been covering lots of different topics. We covered um the patriarchy and and monarchy and socialism and and just all kinds of stuff, but we are still committed to going through the Gita. So here we are in chapter 4, and you can see that I've got it pulled up. We're on page 51 of the Ramanuja commentary. So, um, I'll just dive right in. I'm probably gonna just read through basically, and if I have a question or whatever, I'll pipe up. But otherwise, Sako, you can just stop me at any point
Yeah,
um, to kind of cut in, make commentary, make arguments, whatever you want to do. So,
yeah, and let me know where you have any questions and whatnot.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so and just so that in case anybody doesn't remember or didn't is just joining us, Sako is actually a former Hindu who's now Armenian Orthodox. And so like I trust him to
Born and
know what's that?
born born and raised in the church, apostatized for like a decade or more, and then
Yeah.
came back in 2023. Um, so for all the years I was in Hinduism, I went like deep into Indian schools of philosophy and metaphysics and all that. And now I'm using that same sort of metaphysical, philosophical methodology in defense of the Orthodox faith.
Yes. So so I'm really excited to be working with Sako. This is something I've been passionate about for a long time, as you guys well know. I've talked about these things a lot, but now I'm excited to actually be doing things. So without further ado, chapter 4, Jnana Vibhaga Yoga, or Communion Through Wisdom. And Ramanuja's summary says in the third chapter, it was determined that for the spiritual aspirant in whom the physical impulses are strong, the practice of karma yoga alone is the recommended practice. People are not naturally capable of the practice of jnana yoga, and even if capable, the practice of karma yoga alone, preceded by contemplation on the Atman, is a non as a non-agent is preferable. It has also been taught that even a person who is distinguished for wisdom and is expected to act as a role model for others should still practice karma yoga alone. Now in the fourth chapter, the need for practicing karma yoga is further stressed because it is taught at the very beginning of the present Kalpa age of Manu for the liberation of all beings. It is also demonstrated that the science of the self is included in it. Furthermore, the nature of karma yoga, with its divisions and preeminence of the wisdom factor in it, is taught, and incidentally, the truth about the incarnations of the Lord is also mentioned. So, um, so Sako, kind of just make this make sense a little bit. So basically, karma yoga is more important than jnana yoga, but it's going to teach us what jnana yoga is now.
So karma yoga, you probably remember from previous things, is basically the idea of uh, sort of doing all your usual actions, whether it's brushing your teeth, whether it's going, doing your livelihood, if you're a carpenter, doing carpentry, but always doing it with with God in mind, like kind of almost giving dedicating uh all the actions you take to God as a sort of sacrifice.
Right. And then
Or
it also is sort of the concept of asceticism, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Um but but in karma yoga it's usually more of a mild asceticism for the laity.
Okay. And then Jnana yoga is where you get into more of like the heavier asceticism.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
You'll,
Okay. So, one, the Blessed Lord taught this imperishable yoga to Vivasvan. Vivasvan taught it to Manu. Manu declared it to Ikshvaku. Thus handed down in succession the royal sages. See, you can tell that we're reading a culture's like scripture because it has all these hard to pronounce names. So just like when you read the Bible and everybody's name is hard to pronounce, it's the same. You can tell you're reading mystical texts because you
yeah.
can't pronounce things. Um, Thus handed down in succession, the royal sages knew this karma yoga. But with long lapses of time, O Arjuna, this yoga was lost to the world. So Ramanuja says of that passage, he says, don't imagine that I have just invented this teaching merely as a device for stirring up your enthusiasm for war. I myself taught this yoga to Vivasvan at the commencement of the present age of Manu as a means for all beings to attain the highest goal of existence, which is liberation from the cycle of births and deaths. The royal sages of old learned this yoga, which had been transmitted by tradition from one generation to the other, because of the long lapse of time and because of the dullness of the intellect of those who heard it. It has now been almost entirely lost. 3.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
so this sort of goes to something that is found in a lot of Indian um philosophy, uh, or well, not just philosophy. Like I should say, more schools of spirituality.
Yeah,
Is the idea of like whenever there was like the person who's sort of accredited as being the founder, they would always say like I didn't found this, like I didn't make this up. This is not original to me. I'm sort of inheriting this ancient tradition that's been passed down from countless ages, and I'm just sort of the new guy on the block. Um, so like on one hand it shows, the practice shows humility, and on the other hand it's meant to sort of
to build
it's meant to,
continuity with your
yeah,
forefathers.
yeah, to show credibility, like this isn't something I just pulled out of my butt. um so even the Buddha, like when like people sort of think of Gautama Buddha, like the famous Buddha known as Siddhartha or Siddhartha if you're going off of the Pali pronunciation. um but in the earliest Buddhist texts, even he's saying like the I'm like the 12th Buddha or something. Like I can't remember what it
Right.
was. Like um he like the one he said, I think like according to Buddhist like cosmology and mythology, they believe that the one before Gautama was like 2,000 or 3,000 years earlier. uh
Interesting.
and like Indian cosmology is very like sort of deep time like that. um Whenever you sort of read um a lot of the texts, a lot of the epics and stuff, you don't really see as much, like there's a very timeless quality to them.
Hmm.
like you'll mention certain kings and certain things like that, and only from like possible little textual hints and clues can you really date, like either A, what time it was composed in, or B, what time it's trying to represent itself as being in. So, for example, in parts of the Mahabharata, some scholars have pinpointed possible, even that's not determined yet, but possible references to the Greeks and the sort of Indo-Greek kingdoms,
Interesting.
yeah, like you probably heard like after Alexander went to India and then sort of went back, he sort of opened up the gates to India to the Greek world. So there were some like minor Greco-Indian kingdoms in India and Central Asia. Um, so there's possible mention of these Greco-Indians or the Greeks in general in the Mahabharata, but it hasn't been determined with certainty last time I checked. So there's always this sort of like magical, mythical, timeless quality to Indian legends because you'll have like a historical king interspersed with like some sort of with like a primordial divine or semi-divine entity who's like his great 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 grandfather, you know what I mean?
Right. That's how a lot of ancient literature is, though. Like,
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
the
exactly.
Bible is laid out is actually very unique in the ancient world as far as
Yeah,
like this happened at this time, and it's very sort of like, for lack of a better term, specific. It's like it's very intentional to tell you exactly when this happened. That's not really how most ancient writings work.
yeah, exactly. Somebody could vaguely make that argument for like the very early chapters of the Bible, like everything leading up to the flood. But even there's like some subtle historical hints
Right.
of like certain texts, or like that sort of date it. Like I think there's like possible mention of the city of Eridu and thing like in Mesopotamia and things like that.
Right.
So, but yeah, like in India, there's it doesn't matter how far back in time you go. Reading like you could have okay, you could have a text that's set in I don't know like like it's set during a certain age that is like the present age, right?
Yeah.
Or what happened was not too long ago, and in that setting, there's like chariots, there's like bows and arrows and like golden palaces and iron weapons and steel and all that, right? And then
Right.
you and then it'll describe a time long, long, long before, and very rarely is that time that's described long, long, long before technologically much different from the present time. It was just earlier on. So in that present age, in that far away age, let's say in the Treta Yuga, let's say it took place 3,000 years earlier, and a character in the epic is recounting it, right? Three
Right.
thousand years earlier, there were still golden palaces, there were still steel or iron weapons, there were still chariots. There's no sense of like technological change, for example, that would sort of help date it. You know what I mean? It's always time.
Right.
Like there's always chariots, there's always iron weapons, there's always palaces with golden canopies and walls of stone or whatever. Even though historically we know that um, in sort of the early history of India, similar to Mesopotamia, the earliest buildings were made of like a mixture of wood and mud brick, similar to like the ziggurats in Mesopotamia. They were very based on we have an idea of how they look because of um of uh like stelas, like stone inscriptions that show very detailed images of palaces with like wooden balconies and things like that. So they were very nice, ornate, buildings, but they weren't anything comparable to what's actually described in the epics.
Right.
And as I mentioned, there's no time progression, whereas like in the Bible, whether somebody agrees wholeheartedly with the historical accuracy thereof, you at least see sort of like a linear progression of like simple, like simple, almost like pre-agricultural life, right?
Right.
Then agriculture. Now we have metallurgy. Now we have stringed instruments. Now we have, you know what I mean? It's much more close to what we know from history. Uh, whereas yeah, in a lot of Indian myths, you don't have that progression. There's always been stringed instruments. There's always been metallurgy. There's always been chariots. Um, Sometimes now don't quote me on it because there might be some cases, some stories that say like some heroic legendary figure gave metallurgy or whatever. But even then, remember, there's like a cyclical nature to all this. So even when there's description of certain technologies emerging, it only means in this life cycle of the universe.
Right.
Then the universe sort of gets absorbed back into Brahman, begins again, and then those technologies are sort of reinvented or rediscovered. So so there's always like this like timelessness to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So why is it that way?
I I think it's because Indian some modern Indian nationalists would, disagree with me on this, but I think the primary aim of a lot of these Indian texts is not to be historically accurate. It's to convey philosophical, theological, and moral lessons.
Okay.
So so like there's so there is this sort of like timelessness. So like if I remember right, and we could fact check this, just to be sure, but Mahavir, if I'm not mistaken, in the story of Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, which is sort of like a contemporary religion of Buddhism, still around today as well. The Jains are the you might have seen them. They're the ones that sort of where they're um, they sort of take the Indian teaching of ahimsa or non-harm to its like farthest extreme among the religions. So much so that they wear like masks over their mouths so they don't accidentally breathe in a bug. And sometimes when they walk, they sweep the ground in front of them like gently. So if there's any bugs, they sweep them out of the way before they step on them.
Right.
But yeah, Mahavira. So you know the story of Siddhartha Gautama, like the prince who was sort of sheltered until he came out of the palace. He saw suffering, the old man, the sick man, the dead man, whatever. Um, and then the monk. I don't know how much you've heard of the story, but then
Yeah.
him sort of seeing all those things led to him pursuing an end to the suffering. Um, I don't know if it's told. I don't think it's told exactly that way, but that's that sort of background of a pampered prince, you know, being shocked by the real world seems to also exist in the biographies of Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, and I think it existed with a bunch of other figures as well. I might be wrong, but yeah. So far from like the from like stressing the uniqueness in Indian text, there's almost like a disregard for the uniqueness, and for us
Right.
in sort of the post Christian West, it seems very counterintuitive. But there's almost like an archetypal nature to the figures in a lot of these Indian stories. Like
Right.
what like this isn't to say that they didn't exist, but the way their lives are told and portrayed is in this very sort of timeless archetype sort of way, almost to sort of emphasize that what they teach and what they represent is more important than the minute details of their lives. So
Right.
I think that's why there isn't as much of a stress on historical specificity or accuracy in a lot of Indian literature, and that doesn't really come in until um, I believe the Kashmiri historians who were Hindus um, in about the ninth to 11th centuries is when you start to see like the writing of more precise histories in India. Before that, it's like very, very like archetypal, legendary, and stuff. Um, and you find this to some degree in like Greco-Roman stories as well. Like
Absolutely.
Greco-Roman stories, uh, Greco-Roman stories also sort of tell of like an unidentifiable golden age or an age of heroes. Like for example, unless I'm wrong, and if there's if I can always check this later, but for now, my preliminary analysis is that at least in the versions that I've heard of the story of Heracles, for example,
Yeah.
there's no indicator of what age in Greek history he was supposed to have lived.
Right.
And then even Athens, right? Athens was believed to have been founded by Athena, but like you have guys like Plato talking about Athens, like legends of Athens, going to war with the Atlanteans and like being host to like all these legendary heroes of a bygone age or whatever. So
Right.
so it's like even these like Greek philosophers and storytellers had Athens, which okay, as a sort of prehistoric settlement, yeah, there's been like Neolithic ruins found in of Athens, right?
Right.
But if you ask like Greek historians, Athens has been like a city of marvel and temples and like ships and a navy with like bronze weapons for thousands of years.
Right.
Which we know historically that's not true. so
Right. So there's
so
like
even
an archetypal, it's the archetype of the city, if
yeah,
you
yeah,
will.
exactly, like an archetype of sort of the ideal polis in the minds of the Athenians. So I find that as a sort of common trend in a lot of pagan storytelling of like it almost takes secular historians like Herodotus was a pagan and a believer in the gods and all that. I'm not saying he was an atheist, but he wasn't a religious figure and he wasn't like trying to tell like sort of a mythological story or pass down a folk epic. So Herodotus was like sort of the first attempt at trying to like really write histories in a precise way. So it almost took like people specializing in the composition of history, um, and a degree of like the sort of emergence of like what I would jokingly call investigative journalism, right? Like
Right.
actually testing out the claims of locals you talk to instead of just taking everything they say for granted. It sort of took a bit of secularization among the pagans to lead to the emergence of attempted like precise histories. Um, in Ch- uh, in China, it evolved more organically. Like there wasn't as much of a break between mythological history and like history.
Right.
China, the Chinese, I'll say we're a bit more close to the Bible in that regard. When you read their sort of earliest stories, even of legendary and semi-legendary kings, they'll describe sort of uh, geographic, technological, and other details that sort of indicate what period in history it took place. Like, for example, they might mention copper weapons or something like that
Right.
instead of bronze weapons. It's like, oh, okay, so this is talking about like so it's like talking about kings that lived before the Bronze Age or something, or chieftains or whatever. So Chinese are similar to the Hebrews. Chinese are one of the few cases in the pagan world where you have like or at least attempts at precise historiography.
Right.
So yeah,
That's
sorry,
interesting
there. Yeah,
because not to go
yeah.
off on too much of a tangent, but like there seems to be this interesting thing where when you study the early history of China, it becomes very similar to like the history of the Bible, and then you get like into later history that kind of gets pulled back a little bit, and so you
Hmm.
get It's like paganism kind of developed in China, but when you look at like the very early history of China, it's much more similar to the ancient Hebrew religion. There's like a most high God who they worship as like the true God.
Right.
Um,
And, and
and
and I think they also have like legendary figures that were credited with the developments of certain technologies, if I'm not mistaken. I think
they
I
do,
think that
yeah.
I think they have like the first blacksmith, the first, creator of stringed instruments and things like that. So, we're definitely moving more in sort of the direction of history proper when even your mythology has more of this sort of linear grounding, you know what I mean? Like this, like in the consciousness of the people, there is a sort of sense of progression in time instead of just
Right.
like, oh, there's always been big warships and there's always been chariots and there's always been, huge stone walls with marble temples going back tens of thousands of years. Like, the sort of Greco-Roman slash, or I should say early Greco-Roman slash Indian understanding of history is very, I would imagine, is very appealing to a lot of New Age conspiracists. Like,
Right.
because a lot of them will say evidence that the Great Pyramid was built 11,000 years ago, or so, or
Right.
evidence of of early, I don't know, early drilling technologies going back 25,000 years or something. So like I would, and sure enough, when I was after apostatizing, when I was in my sort of very brief, like maybe year or 2 year long New Age kick, I watched a lot of those New Agey documentaries, and they appealed a lot to uh, Greek legends of like Atlantis and stuff,
Right.
and also Indian legends like Indian stories like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and stuff. And they pointed to like certain weapons that are described in these epics. Like I think there's one thing called the Brahmanstra or something, or Brahmantra, um, which is like a sort of like a projectile weapon that's described in the Mahabharata.
Right.
Um, that's sort of controlled by way of like mantras and like other things like it's like a paranormal weapon essentially, right?
Right.
but but people read that and they're like, nuclear weapons,
Oh,
high-tech missile technology, and some Indian nationalists today sign off on that.
really?
That like, oh, we had the ancient Vedic civilization had missiles and nuclear technology, and just like,
Press
and,
X for doubt.
are you referring to LA Noir?
Yeah.
That's another thing that I like about the Bible is that it doesn't make crazy batshit claims like that. Like it's actually very humble in what it claims.
Right.
Okay, they'll say, oh, but it says like Cain founded a city. Okay, but we don't know. But it doesn't say that it was a city with like iron technology and chariots
Right.
or anything like that. It could have been a city made of like little one-story mud brick houses or something, like a
Yeah.
Neolithic. You know what I mean? Like the Bible is very humble in its claims. When it does talk about technologies, it talks about technologies that we know from history that the ancients had, like metallurgy, like making stringed instruments, like you know, uh, certain forms of weaving clothes or whatever. Like so if I was, if one is to believe in sort of the epic history of any group of people, I would say the Hebrews have the most grounded, realistic representation of early human history, precisely because they don't claim hyper advanced technologies and like uh, like rockets and all these things.
Right.
Um, it fits it fits very closely to what we see at least from like the Mesolithic to the Iron Age.
That makes sense. And I am gonna say that, like, I remember one time I was watching some documentary or whatever, and the guy was talking about how, like, he believed that there was this ancient war between, I think it was actually India and Atlantis, but they had, like, missiles and stuff. And hover cars. He's got, like, the Atlanteans driving around in hover cars shooting at Indian people and stuff. It was so dumb, but the thing is, I remember thinking, like, so why didn't then Atlantis and India just build like a massive, empire and conquer everyone else if they had this stuff? Everybody else is shooting arrows at each other and these guys have like rockets.
Yeah.
Like why aren't they just
It
conquering
also
everyone?
it also depends on who you ask. Like some people would say like it was just the Atlanteans or like one or two civilizations. Some people would say like across the globe humanity was like this technologically advanced. So it
Right,
really depends on who you ask. But like um but yeah, like and this is another like sort of deviation of the Bible because you have like the all these pagans talking about like the gold like the sort of antediluvian golden age of
right,
technology. Well, first of all, the Bible doesn't make like batshit crazy claims about the extent of that technology, which we already discussed. It's very, technology that we know of from the ancient world.
right.
uh, and
It's like the
B,
demons gave them technology. They gave them iron and bronze.
yeah, they didn't give them supercomputers and missiles. Like
Right.
it's like
They gave
which
women the art of makeup and
in
cosmology.
cosmetics and stuff. Yeah, it's like yeah, it's very very humble claims because it doesn't need to be bombastic about it. It says even these things used incorrectly lead to horrendous self destruction. Um,
Exactly.
and that's the other part of the claim. Like the pagans glorified this sort of past golden age before their flood, whenever their flood happened, according to their story. Whereas the Bible says no, it was a period of profound wickedness.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it is interesting to me that every culture has this sort of golden age mythology, but the Bible has that, but the Bible's is unique because it says, yeah, there was this age and it was terrible. Like you would not want to have lived in this time. Like these everybody
Yeah,
was violent and
yeah,
degenerate and just awful.
yeah. You don't need like ancient nuclear weapons for it to be terrible. People just like like hacking each other to pieces with their swords and enslaving women. It's like it was is already bad. Like
Yeah, exactly. There don't need to be bombs. It already sucks.
I I mean never mind the antediluvian age, even the present age, like even the like Moses' own lifetime like sucked.
Yeah, it's
Like
true.
the Bronze Age, which they were living in, sucked. Like,
Definitely. Yeah, I may there are lots of things that I despise about the modern age, but I as an asthmatic and autistic, I definitely am probably better off in at least to some degree in the modern age. Like maybe I would have been a little bit better off like 100 years ago or so, but even then, like orthodoxy
well,
wasn't really prominent in the United States 100 years ago.
yeah,
So you've gotta like factor in like I'm definitely born in the best time for me to have lived, and that's what we need to
yeah,
remember.
yeah, and then the what's it called? And while you and I do vehemently criticize the abuses of technology in the modern day for like consumerism,
Right.
degeneracy, like pornography and all this stuff, it's that's just it, abuses. It's not
Right.
the technology itself. Technology is neutral. It can be
Right.
used for good and holy ends, or it could be used for you know, for damnable things. Uh, so like so the good thing about living sort of in this age, because I used to sort of have that sort of romantic nostalgia about the good old days or whatever, like the good old days in like the Middle Ages or antiquity or whatever.
Right.
And while I do think there are good things there, so I don't like demean our ancestors. I don't. I avoid the extremes of a over romanticism of past eras of human history, and b the Enlightenment myth of progress in
Exactly.
of like, oh, our ancestors were so stupid and backwards and superstitious. We're wise and this and that. It's like yeah, really. It's like
Yeah, so you
great.
came from a
We
long line of idiots, but somehow managed to become wise.
Well, and it's not just that. It's even like oh, we're so technologically advanced, and it's like yeah, what do you use it for? Pornography.
Right, exactly.
It's like okay, well, what have you? Okay, sure, you've given us labor saving technologies. You've given us, and there is good in that. It's like okay, what else? Like at a profound level, what has the advancement of technology or the Enlightenment era sort of given us in like concrete terms
Right.
that sort of add to human worth or human meaning or anything like that? Like
Yeah.
what? Like unless you're very simple minded, I highly doubt most people will say, "Oh, well, just consumerism and watching cartoons and or like going to the bar and hanging out and partying with friends is what makes life worth living." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that's what I say. Like, what has sort of modernity contributed to making life worth living? I would say not much.
Right. Father Seraphim Rose talks about this because he points out that, like, science in and of itself is a good thing, but when you really stop and think about it, science is the lowest form of knowledge. So, like, all of the stuff that we have that's really good and really wholesome stuff is good, like modern medicine and stuff has it, there are advances that are really good, but that's all on the lowest sort of level of what matters. The things that matter the most, like you said, I mean, 80% of this country is addicted to pornography. Um,
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's like um, there's just the statistics are just wild on this stuff, and you stop and think about it, and it's like, okay, if we were living in a golden age, like our politicians seem to say that we are, if we were
yeah.
really living in a golden age, would everybody be addicted to porn? Would the birth rate be so low? Like in a golden age, you would think that the birth rate would be really high, and
Yeah,
that
or
everybody
never
would
mind
be
really high, at least like sustainable. Like people
right,
would there
exactly.
would be a very family centered culture. There'd be like people would have a sense of community and all that. It's like um I mean, whether you're a Christian like us or you're a secularist or whatever, I think we can all agree that like it's what you do with the technology. Um and so like the let's say I'm just getting something on my screen.
Yeah, no worries.
Let's see. I'm not changing anything on your end of the screen, right?
No, not at all.
Okay, because I accidentally swiped the screen away or whatever. I wasn't not sure if I was interfering with the recording. Anyway, um, so it's like, and on the other hand, like because it is really what you do with the technology, um, like you can live a traditional lifestyle. So it's like you said, you're sort of in the best time to be alive in a sense that if you wanted to pack up your family and move to the country, you could do that,
Right.
and you could still have access to cars to automobiles uh, to like the modern stuff when you need it. So
Exactly.
so I would argue that like in large degree, like it's very easy to sort of look at the technology and say like, oh, technology ruined us. It made people fat. It made people lazy. This, that, the other thing.
Like
It's like,
Wally.
yeah, right. It's like no, people made themselves fat and lazy. It's like no one's telling you to play video games for 6 hours a day. Like
Right.
it's like if we have declining birth rates, if we have horrendous drop in family values and this, that, and the third, it's because of us. It's because of our own fallen nature. Um, because a person rooted, grounded in godliness, wouldn't um, wouldn't be hurt by this technology, or
Exactly.
at least not irrevocably. You know what I mean?
In fact, for all of the people who do kind of grump about technology constantly, I have to be honest and say that some of the people who are like some of the best Orthodox Christians I know use technology to live the Orthodox life far better than anybody else I know. Like, and to live a very traditional life. Like everybody talks about wanting to be trad now, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like we need to be trad, we need to be trad. Well, one of the things that I had somebody recently point out that I thought was awesome was it was like hot take. It's actually not historically normal for men to be outside of the home most of their time either.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yes, it's
yeah. We
a
went over this in the patriarchy episode. Yeah,
yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. It's like it's a step in the right direction that people are talking about, women
that
staying
men are
home.
doing remote jobs. It doesn't make you like lazy or unmasculine. It makes you a good father. Like,
Exactly. Like be at home. And so, like, yeah, we pointed this out. You're right. In the patriarchy episode, we talked about like remote jobs and stuff. And I'm a big believer in that for this exact reason that, like, if I'm truly trying to live this traditional life, then it actually makes a lot of sense that I'm going to be kind of, you know, hear me out, at home with my family, like, most of the time. Like,
yeah, because I'm convinced that at least for some of the people who I'm convinced that at least for some of the people who do sort of wax nostalgic about that old like 1950s honey I'm home understanding of
right.
patriarchy, uh they kind of just want to like they kind of just want to be away from their wife and kids. Like
Unfortunately, you're not wrong. Like, I would love
like
to be able to
they
say,
like
oh
the
no,
idea.
that's not it, but like, I've known tons of people who it's like they're just, they're not really trad, they're just workaholics.
It's like oh I'm at my job or it's rewarding or whatever, or even if it's not rewarding, it's like I'm gonna do long hours uh at the office because because I don't know, like I'm the man and I'm a man and I want to be challenged, or B, uh like I don't my kids scream and cry too much. I don't want to be around them, and my wife nags me or whatever.
Right, exactly. No, you
Like
do,
it's
you get this, and then they wonder why, like, if you present your work as if it's liberation from the home, then you shouldn't be surprised when your
when
wife wants to
looks at
go.
that and is like, yeah, like I'm I'm tired of these screaming kids too. I wanna do time at the office.
Right, exactly. Like you shouldn't be surprised then when that's the result. Whereas if you want to be at home and you cherish your time at home and you actually do what you can to be at home more, then it's obvious that like that's going to rub off on your family and your family is actually going to
Yeah.
want to be around you and be at home more and stuff. So Like these things are not just these things don't happen in a vacuum, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and
Yeah,
I think that yeah, go
I
ahead.
would argue that I would argue that long before patriarchy was, assaulted by feminism, it was assaulted by the Industrial Revolution and the sort of
Yes,
leave it to beaver ideal of family life.
exactly. It absolutely is. And that's so this is actually something that I have a Lutheran friend I'm really close to. Who he's kind of I don't know, he's kind of been exploring orthodoxy a little bit, but
Mhm.
he hasn't been ready to kind of make the plunge. And I keep telling him like, dude, the first time you go to the Divine Liturgy, you're not going to want to miss out on it ever again. Like I know you're going to become Orthodox because eventually you're going to come to the Divine Liturgy and then we'll have you. But in the meantime, he's like he's kind of exploring and I
It,
respectfully talk with him about stuff, but
introduce me to him. I'll take care of it.
yes.
Wait till I get through with him.
Yes. But this is one of the things that he and I talk about all the time is like the Industrial Revolution has both sides of this question is like on the one hand, yes, we have the unique opportunity to like truly be people who can't or people who our recent ancestors couldn't be like the 1950s Leave It to Beaver thing. It's like working at the mill was kind of the best option that our grandparents had in a lot of cases. um I mean, unless
Yeah,
you were a
like
farmer or
and
something.
that's part of the city. Like the only people who had a setup where the father was either at home or close to home were people in the rural countryside.
Exactly.
Like the otherwise, if you were at the city, you had to go to wherever the work in the city was. You weren't selling your produce that you grew on your own land anymore. You were working at the factory or at the mill with some big wig or whatever, like the
Right,
factory.
exactly.
So it's like so so you know so yeah, all this romanticizing of like, oh, you know, Mr. So and so, like, in the 1950s. So sort of PSA films, right? Like Mr. So and so has come back from a hard day's work at the newspaper factory or whatever.
Right.
like like it's like looking back at those, and like I'm like, that's sad. He should have been at home with his kids.
Exactly.
Or if the kids were at school, he should have been at home with his wife.
Exactly. Like that we've lost so much that even what we call traditional is actually not. And and so it is. It like it's very sad, but at the same time, like I guess the point that we're making here is that
Mhm.
technology doesn't have to be evil. It can give us the opportunity to reclaim something
Yeah.
that's good if we're willing to use it rightly, which I think that's a big if, because a lot of people aren't willing to use, like I said, technology could give you a chance to spend more time with your wife, but tons of dudes use it to be addicted to porn. So, like,
Yeah.
obviously, it's not doing that for a large swath of the population at least.
Yeah. It's um yeah, it really, and that remote, one example of how technology would help is, as we mentioned before, was remote work. um
Yeah,
if you can get a job where you can, work at, like, set aside one of the rooms in your house as like your office or whatever, then yeah, hell yeah. Like my cousins in Rhode Island, well, my cousin and her husband, I should say, they both work remotely. He sometimes goes into the office occasionally if they need him there in person, but overall, he does work remotely and he does freelance jobs. And she also works at home remotely, and they work in the same office. So it's like if that when So they'll be working. One of them will go on break, uh, and like whoever goes on break, that person will like whip up a quick lunch for both of them or something. Like
Right.
or and even when they're working, right? Like if it's a slow day, they're not in a meeting or something. They'll just like they're in the same office. They'll just be chatting with each other and hanging out
That's
while they're working.
awesome.
So
See, that's the
like
way it should be. Like that's
that's a
how
power factor.
that's actually what my wife and I do too. We work a couple times a week we go into the office together, but for mo the most part we work basically side by side in offices. We have to be a little bit separated because we do counseling, so there's like privacy stuff, but we're still
Right,
like
right.
together, you
You're in the
know?
same building, yeah. Like
Exactly.
you have a session with you have a counseling session, and after that's over, if the other person doesn't have a counseling session, you go and you hang out. Like
Exactly. Exactly. There's no commute where we're apart from each other for like hours and hours.
yeah. And somebody say like, well, what doesn't absence make the heart grow fonder? It's like, yeah, but wouldn't you want to have control over when you have that absence?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's called hey honey, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, we're gonna go like bowling or something, or hey honey, I'm gonna go to the girls, go with the girls to watch a movie, or something. Can you watch?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like that. You have the freedom to have that time apart when you need it.
Right. But not, it's not imposed on you, and that's the
Yeah,
key.
or even hey, honey, I'm having friends, whether it's a husband or wife, like hey, I'm having friends over. We wanted to use the house for the night, watch the game, or have like whatever event, book club, whatever it might be. You mind taking the kids to grandma's or something, or
Right,
taking them
exactly.
or taking them out for the night, take them bowling, take them to the arcade or something. It's like you have that freedom. You don't need to be sweating away at a cubicle, um, or working at a factory to have absence to make your heart go.
Exactly. Exactly. And like yeah, the other side of that too is that like okay, what you just said reminds me of another thing that I'm passionate about, which is the so-called nuclear family is actually not what God intended humanity to be like. Like that is actually a modernist concept too.
Yeah,
Um, we're supposed to be more than just nuclear family. We're supposed to be living in community with like a full community.
right,
Um, so, people talk about it takes a village to raise a child or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have a great relationship with your in-laws or else you're not trad. Like, I get that you might not have control over
right,
who your in-laws are even or whatever. But what I'm saying is that you should at least have, your church community. You should be involved with your church and be, you know,
right,
that should be something that you're doing with your fan. There should be, and like I'll say this, there are tons of families if you're a Christian, there are tons of families in your church, couples who are good people who want to have kids and don't for whatever reason, haven't been able to, whatever. And they would love the opportunity to babysit your kids. Like, I promise you, there's some family at your church who would just adore an opportunity to have a game night with your kids while you get a date night with your wife. Like,
yeah,
so there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have that. I
yeah. Okay,
promise.
absolutely. Okay, let's not get too far off the topic, 'cause
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
yeah,
Sorry. No,
yeah.
but
Okay,
that
so
those are really good points. And I think, okay, I'll bring it
yeah,
back by saying this.
yeah,
Like, I get that that may seem like we went off on a long tangent, but here's why it matters, and then I'll get back to the
yeah,
Gita. It matters because if your worldview is set around this idea that there's like a mythologized age, whether it's a specific golden age or whether it's this kind of cyclical like timelessness, um, you're not really able to live in the present for the glory of God. Not fully. If your
Yeah,
mentality is God has put me where I am today, this is where he has set me for salvation, as scripture says, today is the day of salvation. If that's your mentality, then you're going to be doing whatever it takes. And this is why we make pragmatic statements of like, here's how you do this, is because we don't just want you to know that today is the day of salvation. We want to show you this is what the path of salvation looks like so that as best as you can apply that in your own life. So that's why all of that mattered to the
yeah.
topic
Well,
um,
well,
that
and
we're
something
on.
else, right, and something else I would sort of bring it back to is that because yeah, we did we did kind of veer off topic quite a bit, but I'll bring it back with something also as applicable, which is that so we were talking about like technology run amok, and we were
Hmm.
talking about like the unfortunate tendency of some people to be Luddites, but the sort of pagan understanding of history, even though it's not atheistic, it's very sort of humanistic and maybe even transhumanistic.
Mm.
Uh, because it sort of hinges the goldenness of the age on um like, oh, we had all these technologies and was sort of everybody was sort of like speaking the same language or was like part of a single uh state or empire or whatever. It's always it's always on what humans are doing. Like
Right.
um the Bible sort of takes it on its head and says, well, no, in the beginning we, like, for all intents and purposes, Adam and Eve, even in the garden, they were essentially foragers. They weren't
Right.
hunters yet because they weren't killing animals to eat them, but they were going around, picking fruits and stuff from trees. Like they were foraging. And
Exactly.
the Bible says that's when it's that state of like damn near no technology when we were at our happiest. And
Right.
it's not saying that you need to go back to that in order to be happy, but it's saying, okay, we didn't have the technology, but what did we have? We had closeness with God. We were in a state of righteousness.
Right.
And had and if you're in that state of righteousness, whether you're living, you know, with a caveman level of technology or whether you're living with a futuristic level of technology, you'll be living in paradise. Um,
Exactly.
and and also the the happiness of mankind is linked with communion with God and communion with one another. Whereas in a lot of these pagan traditions, it's linked with knowledge. Like, notice there's always all this talk of this knowledge was lost. Even when we were reading the passage, like there was this knowledge of yoga, and the knowledge was
Mm.
today is lost and stuff. Um, it's there's a sort of Gnostic character. It's like of like knowledge is power. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think the Bible is also pushing back against that assumption. Like, oh, humans were wise in the past in this golden age. Why were they wise? Because they had all this technology and knowledge. Okay, but what did that do for them? You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so this should also sort of put the lie, show the lie of modern technological triumphalism, which is, uh, the myth of progress. Uh, that okay, because I'm able to sort of order food on DoorDash, um, and because I because I can play video games or whatever, because I have all these modern conveniences. I have electricity, running water. Life is good, or at least
Right.
life should be good. And it's that assumption. It's like, okay, if life is so good, why is there so much depression? If life is so good, why are so many people on meds? Why
Yeah.
is why is mental health been turned into like a sort of surrogate religion? Because you notice that, like, I noticed that just in the recent years of like sorry, just checking something. Okay, I noticed in the recent years when people talk about mental health, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like a weapon to use against people, like, or like sort of a retort, like 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 somebody might be angry or whatever. Somebody's like reacting to something that someone said that either was actually wrong or perceived as wrong by that person, right?
Right.
um or let's say somebody's criticizing individual, like a an individual or a group of people, uh and one of the common responses is, who hurt you?
Right.
Or like, maybe you need to see a therapist or something, or or you see people like on TikTok or social media being like, today I'm walking through the park, it's my mental health day.
Right.
Like, mental health is almost like the new god. Like therapy is like like that's not a healthy society.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. My wife's godfather and I were talking about this recently, like just the fact that, like you're saying, it's not just the fact that there's this sort of religion of mental health, but there's also just the fact that like society itself is sort of obsessed with these things in a way that it's like the the priest of our society almost is the therapist, but that's because everyone is so depressed that there's this
Yeah,
kind of reaction to that of trying to be um, saved from this depression through these kind of, I guess, priests of mental
yeah,
health. And a healthy society, a good society, a golden age wouldn't look like that. Um, so
right.
you're
And
absolutely right.
and I'll sort of throw this at you just to play devil's advocate, so you could sort of, I'll throw the ball so you can hit it or whatever. Um, I can anticipate some people saying, well, people have always had mental health problems. We're actually healthier now because people are acknowledging it.
Well, but we didn't. I mean, I
Like,
mean, okay, so here's what I mean by that is um even like I remember talking to somebody who, because that argument does get thrown around a lot, but it's actually been refuted multiple times, and one of the ways it's been refuted is we actually have writings from ancient people, and so we know that ancient people suffered. People have always suffered, right?
yeah,
But people didn't have, it's not just that people didn't have categories to talk about these things, because when you read the Psalms, they don't use the word depression, but you can see that David is going through something like what we would call depression. And you
yeah,
can see how he's handling that with God. You, but there's other things that just don't enter the consciousness. You know, nobody in the ancient world thinks he's a woman when he's a man. Nobody in the ancient world thinks she's a man when she's a woman. Nobody in the ancient world is, you know, I don't know, bipolar or schizophrenic or any of these things. These are byproducts of the modern world. Now, some people
yeah,
will try to say that, like, well, there probably was schizophrenia and people just didn't know about it. I mean, that's why this so and so became like a prophet because he was hearing voices. Well, first off, the people in scripture, they didn't hear voices. They actually saw and interacted with God in a real way. Second of all, um, the whack job guy on the street corner banging his head against a wall talking about how the aliens are coming to get him is not seen by anyone as a prophet. So clearly, like, the problem is not, and people in the ancient world also knew when somebody was crazy, because, like, when you read ancient texts, you see this where people are like, have you gone mad? Are you like off your rocker? People said that to Socrates all the time. Like, maybe you're just crazy. So they knew that there were people who were off,
Crazy. Yeah,
but
and when you read the writings of the prophets, like okay, some people might have thought they were mad or like rambling or whatever.
yeah,
People who didn't obey, who didn't listen to them or whatever, but they didn't think they were like the guy, you know, shitting on the street corner or whatever, and
right,
talking about how aliens are coming to, you know, steal their balls or something like
right,
like forgive the vulgarity, but yeah, it's like it's like the prophets, even when they were like on a street corner, uh they were saying things that make sense. They were telling
exactly,
um they were telling Israel like, you know, repent, you're being wicked, you're oppressing the poor, you're oppressing the widow and the orphan, you're being unjust and all these evil things. That doesn't sound like the ramblings of a crazy person. That's pretty sensible.
exactly. Exactly. And so like in that specific instance, but even just like in the ancient world in general, we don't really see. Now, I think there are reasons for that. I think that pollution is involved with that. I think that there's
Yeah.
a lot of toxic things that like toxicity and things that are real problems that we need to address um, that weren't necessarily problems in the ancient world in the same way. And so yeah, there's things that we can talk about, but the reality is that like there is and even people like the Stoics, the ancient Stoics, so not Christians, these are pagans, and some of them are even like semi-Epicurean, so more like what we would call atheists. But
Yeah.
yet even these Stoic philosophers, they recognized this tendency in mankind that people only come up with stupid, ideas that they have all these mental health problems when they have a certain amount of luxury. And that's why, like Seneca, a lot of people don't know this, but Seneca would actually go through periods of time where he would fast. And then he would have feasting times as well, and every modern Stoic loves the quote where Socrates says, "I get drunk once a year just to see what kind of man I am when I'm drunk." But very few Stoics also like the quote where Socrates said that every year I spend a month eating nothing but very, very simple foods to make sure to see what kind of man I am when I'm constantly hungry. Um,
Yeah.
like no, everybody loves the quote where he's getting drunk. Nobody loves the quote where he's practicing asceticism. But the reason he did that is because he was saying that like what I've noticed is rich people have a lot of weird problems. People who have everything handed to them have a lot of really weird problems. They kind of they're not all there. And he said they're not all there because they have all this time on their hands and all this luxury to do whatever they want. And over time, they become depressed because just doing whatever you want all the time is meaningless. Whereas some guy who's always got his face to the plow and comes home to a wife he loves, or I mean, he's in his home because he's plowing, but you get what I
Yeah.
mean. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
he gets done with his day of work and he walks inside and has a glass of warm, water. and is probably hungry most of the time, probably like a little bit hungry most of the time, a little bit, you know, he's having to do with less, and he and his wife have a bunch of kids, and that they're struggling to figure out where they're going to feed them. But this guy is the guy who's more like he's in paradise because he's just happy that he has a wife and kids to love. Whereas the guy who's really wealthy and has all this luxury, he's unhappy all the time because he can get whatever he wants. And that means that he really just ends up wanting more and more. So Seneca and Epictetus, their solution to that problem, both of them, was to deprive themselves and be like, okay, well, if having what I want all the time makes me a terrible, depressed person, then to be a happy person, I'm gonna not give myself what I want all the time. And that, you know, those guys were definitely not Orthodox Christians, but that's a very Orthodox mindset to have. And so I think that all of that matters to what we're saying because yes, we've only gotten through a couple of verses here, but all of this matters because the point is that it's not like Sako said, within this there's an undercurrent, there's a worldview that we can see, and it's a pagan worldview that's common in the ancient world, and that is that it's a worldview of sort of humanism, a worldview of our achievements and our glory. Um, but that worldview is very much something that Christians have to respond to and respond to in the negative because our achievements aren't what make is not our glory. Our glory comes from our relationship to God in Christ, not from our
Yeah.
achievements. Okay, let's go through a few more verses here.
Yeah. We'll rapid fire it to make up for all the time we spent on.
Yeah, we will. But also like I don't mind. You can tell me if you really want to like hammer through, and next time we go through the Gita, I'll try to keep us on track a little bit better. But I don't mind
Yeah.
taking a long time to go through this because from my perspective, like
Yeah.
I want to thoroughly address Hinduism, but I want to thoroughly address it in a way that like I'm being honest and also just like really exploring out and teasing out like we just did. We're teasing out the implication and like the undercurrent, not just what is
Yeah.
like it's not just about what is like on the page because everything comes from a tradition.
Right.
Um
Well, here's where I'll give our Hindu friends some points.
mhm,
Um, Among the pagans, they are probably they're probably one of the very few that associate the golden age with morality and righteousness instead of
right,
just
which is
like
awesome.
technology and gloriousm. But like because the whole yuga system in Indian cosmology is like you have the Treta Yuga. Um, no, hold on. There's the Prelayu. I'm trying to remember the first one. So the first Yuga is is the is like Garden of Eden status, like um where everything is sort of paradisical. There's like no evil in the world. It's like when the beginning of the universe's life cycle when it's like a newborn baby. You know what I mean?
Right.
And in that period, there's like maximum righteousness. Uh, people do not want for anything. People like take care of each other. The poor, like even people of like lower social classes, are not like in a state of deprivation. They have everything they need. All their necessities are met. The wealthy do not hoard their wealth.
Right.
They're kind. Their rulers are righteous. They're ruled by dharma and righteousness. Um, Now there's still a bit of association where there's like technological advancement. So in sort of the golden age, there's all this goodness and righteousness, and also like technology, but also like access to divine to like divine secrets. So it's believed that during this period is when the Vedas are most widely known, when mantras are not just spoken but have power such that speaking a mantra will actually like bring about certain effects. Uh, where like the yogis and gurus and all that have like the most spiritual power and all that. But because it's righteous, they have all this power of the mantras and all these things, but they don't abuse it. They use it for goodness. Um, Still very like idealistic, but at least like there's this emphasis on goodness and righteousness. And then
Right.
the next yuga is when a little bit of evil has crept into the cosmos. There's a little bit more. There's like actually some conflict. Like so, some people are greedy. They deprive others. There's injustice, but still things are overall pretty good. Um, that's the Treta Yuga. That's the time in which the in which the Ramayana is set, which is like in Indian mythological time prior to the Mahabharata,
Right.
um, where things are like where when you look at the people portrayed in the thing, they're still very idealized archetypal heroes and all that, who are still motivated by righteousness. But there's a few villains, like there's the demon king Ravana who steals Rama's wife and things like that. So there it's more like a black and white, good versus evil. You
Is
know what I
that the
mean?
dude who became the Pussy King, or was that somebody else?
What?
Didn't you tell me that there's like a Hindu story where the dude steals
Oh,
somebody's wife
Indra,
and then
Indra, no, no, no,
he
Indra,
sprouts a
Indra.
bunch of
Oh yeah, no,
lady
no,
parts?
Indra slept with the wife of like a rishi or like a kind of a sage, and he did this by disguising himself as her husband. And when her actual husband came home, saw what found them in bed, he got pissed and cursed Indra to have vaginas grow all over his body, 1,000 of them.
Uh,
um, yeah, but yeah, no, the different. Indra is one of their like the gods. He's not one of the demons.
oh, okay.
But anyway, so yeah, in the Ramayana thing, like humanity for the most part is still righteous, but you have like the beginning of sort of more demonic beings, forces of unrighteousness or injustice appear in the world, and then you get to the age where the Mahabharata is set, which is the Dvapara Yuga, which is when goodness and evil are sort of 50-50. It's like equal parts good and evil. And then you have the Kali Yuga where evil and injustice and degeneracy just sort of take over, and then the universe dies,
Right,
and then is reborn, and the whole thing begins again.
right.
Uh, but so yeah, like credit to Hindus where credit is due. At least in addition to the technological advancement and secret and like sacred knowledge and all this like esoteric stuff being known in the golden age that they believe in, that it's associated with the goodness of mankind and sort of the degeneration of humanity, the mantras no longer working or having the same efficacy, uh, like the demons being more prevalent in creation and all these things are associated with moral decline, not
Mm-hmm.
just like hidden knowledge or whatever. Um, is basically the belief is like, okay, if humanity is in a state of righteousness, you'll have technology and all this cool stuff, and people will be good and they won't abuse it.
Right.
So the two are sort of almost tied together in Indian thinking.
Which I will definitely give them credit where credit is due. Like, that's awesome that they tie in the concept of morality. But I would also say that just like to a certain extent, that makes me think like, okay, but is that really what we see in the world? It seems to me that what we actually see in the world is that in times of great so-called progress, where technology is increasing, we also
Yeah.
see like people being wicked with it. Um, at least
Yeah.
that seems so. It doesn't seem like there is this sort of optimistic, almost
Yeah.
to use a Christian term, almost post mill. This is actually one of the problems I have with post mill theology, by the way, because so for our Hindu listeners, in Christianity, we actually have a group of people who teach that same kind of optimistic theory, where like as people become more righteous, God will bless them with more stuff, basically, and then God
Hmm.
makes life better and better for people as they get more and more righteous. Um, but I my problem with that whole philosophy is just like it doesn't really work with when you actually look around and see the way the world is, you don't see everybody becoming more and more righteous as there's more and more stuff. You just
Yeah.
see like some cultures are very prosperous and very wealthy, and some cultures are not that, and it doesn't really seem to be tied to them being super righteous or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. There's so almost this sort of assumption that and I wouldn't say that it's like humanism or transhumanism in the Hindu case, because the goodness and morality is associated with righteousness, and the
right.
righteousness is associated with how close people follow the Vedas, which means how close they have a, a relationship with the devas, i.e., the gods, but
Hmm.
also Bhagavan, or the supreme Lord, like the supreme being, God, as more like what we would understand as God. Um, so, but yeah, there's sort of this assumption that if that when people are more when and if people are more righteous, and they're not sort of being violent and sort of killing each other and doing all this nasty stuff, when they have more of a spiritual relationship with God and creation and all that, that they'll naturally become more uh, spiritually advanced and technologically advanced and this, that, the other thing. And I used to believe that even before I was a Hindu to some degree, but it's like, is that really the case? Because people would just it, you could have some cases where the society does move more in a this sort of techno spiritual direction, but you could have other societies that are just lazy and complacent. Like,
Right. Yeah. You could have a society where people do all the stuff that we've been talking about and use technology to live more righteous and wholesome lives. But
yeah,
very often that's not the case. That's not really what we see, at least as like it's certainly not a default. It's something that people have to sort of intentionally do and cultivate. So,
yeah. Um, and I would argue that that would exist whether you are like, you can have a society that's righteous and technologically advanced, or wicked and technologically advanced,
right.
and you could have a society that is less technologically advanced and wicked, like a very warlike, bloodthirsty tribal society, or you could have a society that's more like a peaceful sort of hunter gatherer foraging community. Um, but I would argue that even though both scenarios are possible, between those two, I would argue that goodness and like community and all that is more conducive in the less technologically advanced societies. And so like and so and again, this isn't saying we should go back and like get rid of all our technology, but it's saying that I think we have to sort of artificially deprive ourselves of the things of like some of our modern sort of urban conveniences. That's why we always talk about how good it is to, buy a house out in the country and stuff
Right.
like like instead of walking around smelling like Gucci and Chanel like all day or whatever, it smell like horse shit a little bit. It's okay.
Right.
Like you know, have some dust on your clothes, as as one uh as one of the Arab comedians I follow on YouTube like to say, put some hair on your chest.
Yeah. Well, and you also, yes, you smell some things that are going to be a little unpleasant, but you also smell some things that
Yeah, you also
you,
smell like the flowers of the meadow. You
right.
smell like you you have uh like you wake up to the drops of morning dew
Yeah.
on your skin. Like
And you might get dust on your clothes, but you also have sort of like, there's just a different, because like I've lived in both the city and the country, and yeah, it's true that like when you live in the country, you get dust on your clothes and stuff. But also when you live in the country, you kind of don't care. Like it stops mattering. It's sort of like there's a kind of beauty even with that too. Like there's a kind of beauty that comes from, being able to just be out and be in nature and actually experience like the world that God intended us to live in, not, ExxonMobil. Um,
yeah, yeah.
it's like the meme where it's got Lewis and Clark and they're like, look at this vast expanse of beautiful land. Just imagine what we can do with this in 100 years. And then like it pans to what it looks like now. It's just this like gross cityscape with just like some dude taking a poop in the street. And like there's gas stations and
I
just
mean,
junk
I'd be,
everywhere.
I'd be dead. If you're gonna take a shit, at least take a shit in the woods. Like, if you're
Right?
gonna take a shit anywhere other than a toilet, like, at least in the woods, it'll sort of organically like blend into the landscape eventually. You know what I mean? Like it just becomes part of the land. Like the poop dissolves and becomes part of the dirt. Whereas if it's on the sidewalk, you just have shit stains all over the
Right?
sidewalk.
Exactly. It's just like, yep, this is progress right here. Um on that cheery note though, so I do have to get going pretty soon, but
Yeah,
we'll pick up on verse 3 next time we meet for at
yeah.
least next time we meet for the Gita. We'll probably cover, knowing us, we'll probably cover some other stuff. But I'm glad that we did this, and so I get that like you might be like, oh man, you've only gone through two verses, and but I'm glad because here's the thing. This is
We're
actually
taking we're
something
we're
I've
we're,
been wanting to um this is
we're taking
actually a topic I've been wanting to cover for a long time and I didn't know how to kind of broach the subject. I didn't have my thoughts as set as I wanted to for that. And so I'm really appreciative of Sako's time that he was able to help me get that where I wanted it to go and needed it to go. But I'm also really appreciative of the Gita. Like, for our Hindu listeners out there, I want you to know that, like, I'm appreciative of your text because it gave me this beautiful opportunity. Thinking through what your sages wrote gave me this beautiful opportunity to think through it in this perspective and to cover something that I've been thinking about for a long time. So I want to thank you guys, um, and thank you guys for watching and for listening to us
oh,
goofballs.
and then after we're done, can I ask you something after you stop the recording? Don't want to
Yeah,
take.
no problem. No problem
Yeah.
at all. So did you have any closing thoughts that you wanted to share?
um, mostly just like I think I think as far as like our understanding of human aspirations,
Yeah.
there's at least compared to other non-Christian religions, I would say we definitely have more overlap with our Hindu friends than we on that issue at least than we don't
Right.
uh, because um, something about Indo-Aryans, like the Indo-Iranian peoples, really sort of geared them towards an emphasis on righteousness and morality and honesty and striving for the truth. Um, the truth not in like a factual sense, but like the truth in like as in like the righteous order of nature and all that, as
Yeah, like a
opposed to
higher
what
truth.
yeah, as opposed to what they call the lie, which is like, evil or demonic influence or whatever. Because of that, I feel like there's a lot of overlap because you find the same sort of emphasis in Zoroastrianism on truth, righteousness, goodness, um, that you just sort of don't find among many of the other pagan religions. I'm not saying it's not there. You'll find, Greeks and Romans and other people talking about honesty and righteousness and all that. The question is like, what do they mean by that?
Right.
And to what degree is it important? Is it just sort of one of many things that's just there, or is it the core heart of what they consider like the goal of humanity? Like, is it the core of their religion? And I would argue that both union that I'll give Zoroastrianism and Hinduism credit in that, much like us, um, goodness and union with God are at the very core of their religions, and the two
Right.
are very closely tied. They're not always inseparable. It depends on which school of thought, but they're almost always closely tied, and they are held up high above other things like glory and power and virility and prosperity and things like that. So I just so like to I guess my closing thought in regards to that would be, as Christians, we see you guys, and we agree with you on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We definitely have more in common with our Hindu friends than we do with Muslims and Calvinists. So,
Yeah,
um,
despite claiming to be an Abrahamic religion, Muslims are like Islam is actually very pagan in its values.
absolutely. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching or listening. Please share this with your friends, especially your Hindu friends, so that they too can be freed indeed. God bless.